In a stunning and unexpected interview, billionaire philanthropist Melinda French Gates is now opening up after allegations against her ex-husband, Bill Gates, were included in this last drop of the Epstein files. Here she is talking to NPR's Wildcard podcast.
No girl should ever be put in the situation that they were put in by Epstein and whatever was going on with all of the various people around him. Whatever questions remain there of what I can't even begin to know all of it, those questions are for those people and for even my ex-husband. They need to answer to those things, not me. At least for me, I've been able to move on in life, and I hope there's some justice for those now women.
The files included Epstein making unverified claims about Gates's sexual relationships, which a spokesperson for Bill Gates has called false. Melinda French Gates has said publicly it was in part her ex's relationship with Epstein that led her to seek a divorce. Joining me now, the reporter who spoke with Melinda French Gates, Rachel Martin, host of NPR's Wildcard podcast. Also with us, Christy Greenberg, MS Now legal analyst, former SDNY Criminal Division deputy chief, and former federal prosecutor. Rachel, first of all, take us inside your conversation with Melinda. It occurred to me she's a pretty media-savvy person. She hasn't talked a lot about the accusations that have been made against her husband, talked about her personal life. Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense of why she decided to talk about this now?
Because I asked her, Chris. I mean, I will just say first off that our show is not a news show. Wildcard is a show about a person's interior life, about how they make sense of themselves, how they make sense of the world. And I had already scheduled this conversation with Melinda for that day, right after this weekend when this latest tranche of emails related to Jeffrey Epstein was released. And so in that context, I felt like I had to ask her how it was sitting with her. And, you know, she could have just said, I've said what I want to say. I'm not going to talk about this anymore. And to her credit, I mean, she was really forthcoming. She centered, first and foremost, the experience of the young girls and the very young women who were victimized by Jeffrey Epstein and everyone around him. And overall, I mean, it's just such an awful, awful story. And, you know, she was very honest about how it played into her divorce and pushed her to separate herself from their joint foundation and to go her own way. And she was very clear that she has moved on. It's taken her a long time to rebuild trust as she moves forward, but she has moved on.
Christy, I want to play something that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said on Monday on Fox.
It is not a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. And so as horrible as it's not a crime to email with Mr. Epstein. And some of these men may have done horrible things. And if we have evidence that allows us to prosecute them, you better believe we will. But it's also the kind of thing that the American people need to understand, that it isn't a crime to party with Mr. Epstein.
Deputy Attorney General says partying with Jeffrey Epstein is not a crime. I wonder both what your reaction is to that and whether you think when you hear things like that, that there will still be answers forthcoming for the thousands of survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and his abuse ring.
So I spent years at the Southern District of New York prosecuting sex trafficking cases, in particular those involving underage girls. And one thing that people may not realize is that when Jeffrey Epstein was in this orbit of all of these very influential, very powerful people, very wealthy people, very well-connected people, that served really two purposes for what Jeffrey Epstein was trying to do in his sex trafficking operation. One, it has a coercive effect because these girls are looking at the people he's surrounding himself with. And when he says to them, I can get you opportunities for jobs, for education, for travel, for things they're interested in, these young girls believe him because of the company he keeps. And the second piece of it is they also may feel that once they are in his web, that they can't escape, that they can't go to law enforcement, that they can't actually do anything because he is so powerful, because he is surrounded by these people that are very powerful, politicians and the wealthiest people in the world. So, not that these people may have known that, but that is the effect of what Epstein did. Everything he did was intentional. It had a purpose. And, and in making these introductions to these powerful people to get these girls comfortable with him is part of his whole process of gaining their trust and then exploiting them. So to flippantly say, well, it's not a crime to party with them, kind of, it really doesn't, I think, take into account just how these operations work and exactly how these girls are exploited. So it's not a comment of someone who really understands what these crimes are.
Christy, Ed Luce wrote about this under the headline, quote, "The Epstein rot goes deep." This is what he wrote. "The idea that anyone did not know about Epstein's conviction as a sex abuser is absurd. Some people spurned his social approaches," and then he mentions Melinda Gates and editor Tina Brown and adds, "Alas, their reaction was all too rare. Epstein's most stupendous feat was to become a powerful New York insider after being registered as a sex offender." It begs the question, if there are to be cases against enablers, I wonder, as someone who taps into the zeitgeist, right, of the conversations that are going around internally that people are having, maybe externally with their friends, do you sense this Epstein story is coming to an end?
It's interesting.
I'm sorry, I meant that for Rachel. I apologize.
My answer is no. I don't think it's coming to an end, because you even have Melinda French Gates, the former wife of Bill Gates, saying that you need to keep asking questions, that the details of these allegations, while some may deny them, need to be interrogated further. And again, the human toll of this sex trafficking ring and the behaviors and abuse carried out by Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. I mean, the web of victimization is so wide. And Melinda French Gates is only one person, right? She's just one person who was unknowingly dragged into this saga. I mean, think about the many, many, many young women who have suffered as a result of this. And if it were to just be buttoned up now, there would not be justice for all of those girls and young women.
Christy, Rachel is right. She is just one woman, but she is Melinda French Gates, and people know who she is. And she could have just said, again, as Rachel points out, and I'm done talking about this, or whatever she wanted to do, not to answer the question. How important is it for someone like that? And I think about, she's got kids. She has grandkids. Like, she could step away from it and I think not be judged. But to say these people have to answer for it.
Mm-hmm.
It is important. It is important for anyone who is, has a prominent voice and a platform to be demanding answers, because when you demand accountability, then hopefully that puts pressure on the people in power to actually deliver some. I found remarkable in the files, there is, among various things, there is a PowerPoint presentation that the FBI put together. It looks like it was after the Maxwell proffer in July of 2025, so something that's fairly recent, where they give an overview of the Epstein investigations. And there's one slide that says prominent names. And it's got a slew of pretty salacious statements and accusations against a number of prominent people. And it was in an FBI PowerPoint presentation, but there's no indication of the context of those statements, whether or not they were ever investigated, whether or not the sources were ever deemed credible. It's just a slide of accusations. It's as though, the FBI is TMZ and not actually an investigative agency. What I would expect to see is, okay, these are pretty extreme accusations. What was the follow-up? And that was something that wasn't in that presentation, and certainly begs demands follow up for each of those accusations because they are so serious. We're talking about child sex trafficking. I mean, there isn't a more serious crime out there. So one would hope that rather than look to collect headlines and salacious information from the files, that the FBI and the DOJ actually do their jobs and investigate.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the full interview on the Wildcard podcast with Melinda French Gates will be available tomorrow. Rachel Martin, we appreciate you coming on. Christy Greenberg, as always, your expertise in this area is invaluable.